Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Self-Published Success, a show that highlights forward-thinking authors who chose self-publishing over traditional, found success in doing so. My name is John Feldman, founder of Visionary Literary, and your host for today's show. Our guest today is Mark Herschberg. Mark is the author of The Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You, and the creator of the Brain Bump app, which I personally have on my phone and I love. Mark has built a bridge for a gap we all have. We writers, we're all readers, and although we love diving into the pages, we typically only retain a fraction of what we read after closing the book. Mark has built a writing process that moves beyond the page, helping readers to retain more of those words we authors spend so much time putting together. And two fun facts about Mark is that he has over a dozen patents to his name, and he also works with many nonprofits, currently serving on the board of Plant a Million Corals. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
We're excited to have you. So, as I mentioned, authors, we love to write. We formulate words, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 words we put down into a document. We send it out into the world, and we hope that everyone gains the insight that we want. But again, we only retain a fraction of that as readers, and we all know that. So I'm really excited to talk with you today to share some insight about things that we can do to ensure that our books are really making the impact we want them to have. But I would like to first start by, can you tell the audience a little bit more about you, your background, and what got you into writing?
Sure. My background, I primarily work as a CTO, or these days a CTPO, Chief Technology Product Officer. I build tech startups. Early in my career, I recognized I wanted to become a CTO, I wanted to be the leader, and realized that to get that job, it wasn't just about being the best engineer. There were all these other skills I'd need: leadership, negotiating, team building, communication, but no one ever taught me. So I set out to learn these skills on my own. And in doing so, I recognized these skills aren't just for leaders, they're for everyone. Now, as I went on this journey, MIT was getting feedback. MIT, where I went to school, got feedback from companies saying, we can't find these skills in people anywhere because they're not being taught.
Right.
So at MIT, 20 plus years ago, we created a program referred to as the Career Success Accelerator, where we would teach these skills to our students. And I've been teaching there ever since. I helped to develop the class. I've been teaching there ever since. And I thought, you know what, our students, they take this class and then they forget everything, and then they go off to their summer jobs. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
So I should write up some notes for them, because in this class, it's very hands-on, so students aren't taking notes. Let me write up notes for them. And what I thought would be 20 pages of notes became 30, 40, 80. Once it passed 100, I said, you know, I think this is a book.
Yeah.
And that led me down the path to my book, totally unexpectedly, but then also that same need of they're not retaining it led to the app as well.
Well, that's excellent. I love and the classroom thing too. So obviously, when we were first talking, I'm thinking about books and because books, writing, reading, but yeah, the classroom too. I mean, as a college graduate, and even going back to high school, like there are so few things that I remember from being in class, from being in lectures. So really appreciate the fact that you decided that you're like, all right, something has to happen here, something has to change, and then not really surprising that you found as you started, it just accumulated and accumulated. So tell us more about the process, about everything that you found and that you put together.
You know, it's interesting. My writing process was chaotic
Mhm.
because it really was just notes. I was actually spending a lot of time traveling for work. I had time on planes where, well, I don't want to focus my work right now. I'm stuck in a seat. Let
Yeah.
me just write up some notes for the students. I've been meaning to do this for so many years. And again, it's just kind of chaotic jumble of notes. But as it grew, I said, okay, well, now let me step back. I had to put some structure on top of it because it really was disjointed at first. Now I know the space well enough that I could understand what structures, what approach to use. Often people ask me, well, how long did it take to write your book? I tell them really it only took around 4 months or so. But there's a big asterisk, which is I've been teaching this for 20 years.
Right.
So that's where the work really happened. The 4 months was just actually typing it out and organizing it. And for many upcoming authors, for nonfiction authors, certainly, don't be afraid to start out doing talks even before your book is there and talk to people and work through it and get feedback. In fact, one of the things I hear often in my book, people say, I'm reading your book and I'll read something and I have a question, but I turn the page and you've answered that question. It's not that I'm a genius. I've taught this so often. I know what question is coming next because I've heard it time and time again. If you're a fiction author, tell those stories sometimes. For example, Tolkien, the guy who wrote Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, if you look, the stories he was telling his children for decades, he was doing the world building. He was basically practicing and refining. So all of us can spend time before we're actually writing, building that body of work. And then the writing part gets a lot easier.
Yeah. And that's true. It's almost as if, like you say, like speaking or the storytelling component, you with teaching, it's like that's your drafting process, but you're not doing it on paper. So instead of outlining and drafting and iterating, you're doing that in a different format, in a more productive format too. And you are getting feedback, like you were saying. It's you were doing teaching for so many years and getting all that feedback. So when it came to the book, and obviously, like you said, people were saying like, I had a question, and typically what we do is we get out a highlighter and we highlight it and we think we'll come back to this and we'll try to find an answer, but you answered it in the next page. What were some of the other, maybe like some aha feedback that readers had that really solidified everything that you've done? Because I mean, this was years of putting together all of these notes. What were some of the other positive pieces of feedback that people were saying that made you realize, like, wow, this is something that really should be more widespread?
There's a couple things I've done that are probably not so common, but should be. So one thing about my book, now most nonfiction books are way too long. It's one idea that's about 40 pages, and then you beat it to death for another 150.
Right.
The reason for that, by the way, has to do with history and spine width, that you need the spine to be a certain width, because if it was too thin, it couldn't be seen on the shelf. If it was too thick, well, then it's too hard to carry. And that's why there's a kind of standard target length for books. That will hopefully start to change with ebooks. That 40-page book should be fine. There's no spine anymore.
Right.
We see it online. But for now, there's this kind of standard width. I said, I don't want to write a book where I take one idea and just expand it beyond its usefulness. So my book, I have 10 topics, 10 chapters. Topics I talked about earlier: negotiating, networking, leadership, team building. These ideas are all each a standalone chapter. And the way my book works, I called it the Career Toolkit. You don't have to read it linearly. I say right at the start, there's a couple pages intro. I say, go jump to chapter 8, networking, if that's what you're concerned about. And yeah, the chapters do reference each other, and I talk about how this skill applies to that, but you can read them all standalone. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing going forward is creating a lot more non-linear books, a lot more content that can be accessed not just first page to last. I think this is going to be the future of books.
That I agree with that. And I like that too, because as our attention spans get shorter, and I feel like a broken record because I say this on every episode, but shorter books and shorter, more compact lessons. The same can be said as well, like what were you saying, in like the nonlinear fashion. You can open up your book to chapter 8 and you can read it, and chapters 1 through 7, you'll still understand what's in 8 if you don't read 1 through 7. For fiction authors who write series books, the same thing applies. If you have someone pick up book number 2, you have to write it in a way where you're still introducing the characters to a new reader, yet not belaboring the intro process for a returning reader. So there is that fine line to walk there, but it's a very good point. And again, I like that. I do also believe that this is the future of books because I think things need to be shorter, more concise, and more actionable as well. So,
Now, one other thing that we did is how we did the branding. And if you look at my book, we went through a couple different cover designs and we landed on one that has this iconography. It's got these little, they look almost clip arty, and it's little blue characters doing the different activities in the book, interviewing or having a career plan, leading. And when we came up with that design, it led me to an opportunity because when you're doing a book, particularly for nonfiction authors, the book's not your be all end all. And the secret, I'm sure you've said this before, you're not going to be a millionaire from your book.
Yep.
This is not how you're going to retire. The book is one part of a larger strategy of your business.
yes.
And so don't think of the book alone. It's part of your business. So when we did that cover with that iconography, said, okay, this is great because I can take that iconography. I use the same iconography on my website,
Right.
on my blog posts, on my social media posts, in my talk, in an earlier version of an app I did. And there was just a consistent brand across all the ways you could interface with me and my content. So think of your book as one part of your larger brand.
Yes, that is a very, very good point. It is a one part of your brand. And like you were saying, if you use all that iconography or your branding in all these other locations, it's just a way of omnipresence, getting yourself out there on many different variables and channels. So do love that. There's so much to it. Like you were saying, your brand. So you wrote this book, you have this process, you're teaching at MIT. So it seems like your schedule would just be jam-packed. But on top of that, you also helped to build multiple VC-backed companies. You're a very busy person, and you did the Brain Bump app as well. How do they all play together, and how have you had time to make everything work? So, I guess this is going to be a loaded question now because I'm asking you another question on top of it already. But authorship and branding takes a lot of continued work after you hit publish to make sure that book stays in front of eyes. So how do you manage to balance your career working with these VC-backed companies with authorship?
It does take a lot of work, but if you can be clever about it, you can leverage effort in one area for another. Some of my tech companies, my primary area is cybersecurity. And I've got a cybersecurity company right now that I'm working on. But in the past, I've worked in media, in lead generation, in marketing. And I learned a lot about those areas. I didn't know anything about marketing 15 years ago, but I put some effort in and I worked at some companies and I learned about it. And that's what helped me actually create Brain Bump and to recognize here's how it could work because I've been in the space and I learned from it. And I can now apply it to new ventures. Or when I think about how I want to do the branding for my book and going beyond the book, that comes from prior experience. We were just chatting before about one of my nonprofits, Plant a Million Corals, and you have a personal interest in that space, you and your wife.
Yes.
Now, I didn't know that ahead of time. We met because we have some overlap in publishing. But oh, look, we have some overlap in another area, and this can now tie in and lead to opportunity for both of us in a different area. And so if you keep a wide, diverse network, if you keep your ears open and you learn and you listen for areas of overlap or listen from what can I get that might not be what we formally set out for, but here's some additional value, you can get a lot more efficiency and you can really play in multiple sandboxes.
Yes, I like that. And for anyone listening who authors, again, once you press publish, so much is on you to do the marketing and the networking, whether you're traditionally published or self-published. And a good hack, I guess, a personal growth hack. Mark, you did it and I've done it too. I wanted to learn about marketing. So I went out and I got a job with a marketing company. So I learned marketing while also being able to pay my bills instead of just doing marketing on my own and researching on Google. I went out and I sought expert help while also having, a job and a career. So for anyone who is looking for that, there are many marketing companies, digital marketing companies out there. I'm sure you can get, writers have content marketing or content writing experience, SEO writing experience. I'm sure that you can merge the two. And Mark, like you were saying, grow your network and find some other ways to collaborate in the future. So very good message there. I want to talk more about brain bump. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about, one, why start it, and then two, more about what a user can take from it?
Sure. There's two challenges with Brain Bump that we're solving. One is for the reader or content consumer. The other is for the author or content creator. And I use those more general terms because it works for books, but also blogs, podcasts, classes, talks. These are all just different channels of conveying information.
Right.
The fundamental problem is that where you read information isn't where you need information. I have a chapter on networking. If you buy my book, you're going to read that sitting at home. You're going to need that 2 months later when you're out at an event.
Yeah.
So how do we connect the two? Ideally, you would have those tips right there. So 2 minutes before you walk into the event, you can pull out the key ideas and say, this is what I need to remember. It's that just-in-time access, because you're otherwise going to forget. Because when
Yes.
someone closes the last page of your book, they're going to start to forget everything. Within 2 weeks, they've forgotten most of it. Now, there's also, we know spaced repetition works. Spaced repetition is a fancy name for seeing it again. It's why in school we open the textbook multiple times before the test to see it over and over. So there's also some fundamental stuff that may not be just in time. I know when I need to use networking. I know I'm walking to this event, but I have a chapter on leadership. You don't know, oh, wait, in 5 minutes, I have to lead. Hold on, I got to get the leadership tips. It happens spontaneously. So I need to keep that top of mind. So how do we help the readers keep the content top of mind? That's challenge one. How do we keep the content creators also top of mind? Because word of mouth marketing doesn't work if people forget about your book.
Right.
Likewise, we said your book's not how you're making most of your money. You're probably, especially if you are a nonfiction author, you're selling some other product or service. And here's the thing, I can go on a podcast or I can be at a cocktail party and mention my book and I can get a sale, but I'm not going to convince you to spend $10,000 on some premium service.
Right.
You have to have multiple rounds of engagement. And this is stuff I've learned from my days in marketing. You have to have those multiple touch points. You have to build the brand trust. You have to go through it, know, like, love. That requires repeat exposure. So both these cases need repeat exposure. And that led to the insight in Brain Bump, which I'll explain in a second. Interestingly, I thought this must have existed. I said, oh, someone's surely done this. I'll just go license it. I was shocked that this didn't exist. So Brain Bump, it's a cross between a book summary app, a flashcard app, and a daily affirmation app. We have pieces from all of it. So the content creator, the author, the podcaster, the speaker, you'll take the key ideas, what you might highlight in a book, a key 2, 3, 4 sentences, here's the key point, and you'll enter those onto the server. That generates effectively flashcards that go onto the app. So the app user of Brain Bump, completely free app, they download the free app from the app store. They say, oh, here's a book I'm reading, or here's a book I've heard about. Maybe I want to check it out. I haven't even read it. We don't check for proof that they bought it. They add that set of content. They basically get the flashcards from your book or other set of content. And now they've got the flashcards. It's not Q&A. It's just, here's the tip. They are all tagged. They're tagged by topic. So my book, I have tags like leadership, networking, interviewing. You can put whatever tags you want. It's like hashtags. And so now the app user, the content consumer, can get one of two ways. Either they can open it up and say, I'm going into that networking event. I'm going to open the app, click that networking tab to get all the networking tag to get all the tips that are tagged networking. You go, okay, tip, 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 flip through them. Good, now they're top of mind. That's a just in time. Or they can set, you mentioned at the start, you get that daily reminder.
Yes.
You set at a time you, the app user, want, when you want that little push notification. This is like the daily affirmation. So 9 a.m. each day as you go into the office, you think, I want to get advice on leadership. Maybe at 6 p.m. you say, I want to get advice on a successful marriage. And you're getting the advice when and where it's most relevant for you. And that makes it resonate much better, and it builds that brand credibility.
So, listeners, if Mark hasn't sold you on the benefits of this free app yet, I will piggyback off that and just say, so the notifications that you said, I turn off notifications for basically every single app on my phone because it's a distraction. I have notifications on and I look forward to them. And I also click on them every single time they come up on the phone because they're not, I don't know, in a world where you're trying to be sold and notifications, push notifications try to get you to open the app. Brain bumps don't. They provide insight and you want to click on it and you want to open it because, like you said, Mark, it's at the time of day and at the location where you most desire to see these things. So they're beneficial for you, the consumer, the user of the app, instead of for the app, creator, which is you. But I'm sure it's beneficial for you, but also beneficial for us, the users.
If you think about how most media works,
Mhm.
social media, email lists, which we recommend to authors, that is push media. I'm going to send out an email at 3 o'clock today, or do a tweet at 3:15 today with a thought. Here's Mark's leadership advice for the day. The problem is half the audience isn't reading their email that day or on social media. It's a busy day. Even if they do, say, oh, well, there's a good leadership tip from Mark. But you know what? I don't need that. Leadership's not my problem today. I'm trying to hire people or market or write my book or do editing. It's not relevant. And then 6 months from now, when it is relevant, no one's going back and saying, let's look through Mark's old tweets to see if there's something useful.
Yeah.
We throw it out and just hope it lands with a few people. This is pull media. We are letting our audience pull to them the part of our body of work that is most relevant, most useful, and so it has a higher resonance. It lands and creates that better connection. We say, this is so useful. This is what I need when I need it.
Right.
And that builds your brand.
That is, there are so many thoughts that run through my mind about how newsletters and social media of the future could work based on what you were saying. And hopefully for the sake of the users and that pull media, we can implement some of those changes. So Mark, you as a CTO, you're on the board of some nonprofits, you're working on Brain Bump. What is next for you in this kind of arsenal that you already have in store?
Well, I do have another startup that's a cybersecurity startup that we're working on, but we're going to continue to work on Brain Bump. So at the time that we're recording this, which is early in 2023, Brain Bump right now, and remember, it's completely free. We've got content on there, and I describe it like a streaming service. We're always adding new content. There's new stuff coming on. Right now, all our content is business, I would say. It is careers and leadership and marketing, and even we have authoring content on there as well. But we're going to expand that content set to get into, I gave the example of marriages and marriage advice. We don't have that yet. My goal is I don't want to start with, we have one thing about marriages. Once I get a couple authors or speakers or podcasters or others in a particular vertical, we'll launch that vertical later in 2023. So we'll be expanding the different categories we have within Brain Bump. We also have new features that we'll be rolling out later in Q2, and then additional features throughout the year.
That's excellent. Well, I am personally very, very excited to see all these features rolled out, to see the different authors that get to get their brand awareness on Brain Bump's app and to see Brain Bump's user base grow, because I am 100% certain that it will, based on everything that I've seen so far and that you've discussed on this episode. So we thank you for putting this together, for using your resources and compiling this. So before we leave, where can people, other than downloading Brain Bump, where can people find and connect with you?
I'm going to give you 3 websites because I have multiple brands. If you're curious about the book, the careertoolkitbook.com is my book's website. And you can look at that, see how I chose to do a book website. One thing to note, if you go to the blog section, within the blogs, we use the same type of tagging. Yes, the blogs are ordered chronologically, but you can see we use the iconography. If you just want negotiation advice, click that icon and you'll just see negotiation blog posts. So it's that same nonlinear approach. But on that website, you can learn more about the book and get in touch with me. There's also a bunch of free resources. That is the careertoolkitbook.com. Cognosco Media is where I have a lot of writing about this future of media, about pull media, about nonlinear media. And so that's Cognosco Media, COGNOSCO media.com. And then if you're interested in the Brain Bump app, go to brainbumpapp.com. It's the one-page website, has everything you need to know, will lead you to the app stores for the free download. It's got a 90-second video walking you through how Brain Bump works. There's information on it. If you're interested in getting your content on it, down at the bottom, there's a button you can click and let us know you're interested. So all of that is at brainbumpapp.com.
Yes. And for anyone listening, the nonfiction authors who are listening, that is an excellent way to, like Mark was saying a little bit before, increase your brand awareness. Obviously, visit all 3 of those sites. We'll put those in the show notes so that you can visit those. But that third one and getting your content out there helps the app, helps users of the app, and then helps you as a personal brand. So, Mark, thank you for sharing everything. Really excited to hear again how Brain Bump and how everything in your career kind of continues to come together. I don't know how you have room in your schedule to do anything else, but I'm sure that you will. So we really appreciate you coming on to the show today.
Thanks again for having me.
Thank you.